Hi, so welcome to a part two, I guess, of conversation with Seb, a Mind Valley life coach based in the UK, and myself, Sylvain, the founder of Puru. And yeah, how you doing, Seb?
Yes, I'm very well. Thank you for your time as always. It's always a pleasure to
Absolutely.
chat and catch up, shall we say?
Yeah, it's been a while, right? So I don't know. Let's start with what you've been up to, right? Since we last spoke. I mean, looking
Yeah.
very smart today. I see.
Yes, I know. Just coming back from a bit of work, but you caught me. It's always
Nice.
what was I going to say? There's always something going on, isn't there? And I'm like, oh, I've got a call, I've got this. Life gets in the way, and I'm like, oh, well, don't be late, don't be late.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, no, it's I know a lot about timekeeping, right? It's we spoke about it last time, right? It's sort of Swiss life and timekeeping is essential here, right? There's even a special word, right, for people that arrive too early all the time.
Yeah.
Like you should be early, but not too early, basically, right? Don't be the guy that's too early all the time, otherwise
I'm
you're
just
gonna
going to
that's
say
gonna go for you. I don't know the word, but
it's so funny because sometimes I was literally having a conversation with a gentleman earlier about
Mhm.
what is that ruling of, is let's say you've got a meeting at 10, is 9:45 on time or is 9:45 early? And I
I
was
think
literally having
that's a
a
bit
conversation.
early, yeah. So if you get there too early, right, because you didn't time the traffic right or whatever it is,
No,
you got to run around the block a few times, like randomly or something,
I
right?
was just going to say. But then at the
Yeah,
same time, what's also interesting is the mindset of
yeah.
if you were to be late, do
Hmm.
you turn around and say apologize for being late or do you thank them for waiting? Which is interesting.
Well, yeah, this is one of those interesting ones, right, that keeps popping up, and it's probably thank you for waiting, right? It's more of a positive reinforcement, right? I guess than a sort of you know, it depends what it is, right? Who it is, I guess, right?
No, I agree. But then I think also if I'm holding the meeting, if someone just apologizes, naturally it's a bit more negative, and you're like, oh, as opposed to if
Mhm.
they say, oh, thanks very much for waiting, you're like, oh, okay.
No, pleasure. I don't.
Yeah.
Pleasure's all
We wait all
mine.
the time.
No, I'm sorry for being early. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny, right?
absolutely.
But yeah, how are things in the UK and with
Yeah, so it's nice. I mean,
yeah.
I think like we spoke last time, so I've been in Manchester now nearly 2 years.
Okay,
So
yeah.
time is flying by. Still rains
Nice.
constantly. We happen to have all seasons in a day, more
Right, okay,
often
yeah.
than not, which is
Interesting.
a perk of, let's say, living in the northwest of England.
Sure, yeah. But still dreaming of the beach like your background, I
Of
guess, or
course. I
maybe.
mean,
Yeah.
you know, if you tell yourself and you imagine it enough, you're going to be there one day, aren't you? So,
Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, you have to have a dream basically, right? As a part of life's kind of journey and a purpose, or is the Japanese word, is it ikigai,
yes,
find your
Ikigai, yes.
purpose, basically, right? And I don't think we necessarily have, a specific purpose, or mission, let's say, but finding what you're passionate about, what you like doing,
Yeah.
clearly something you're skillful in, right, in life is, I think one of the challenges that we all have to discover at some point, and then once you've honed in on that, and then going for it, right, and then materializing or manifesting that dream and that sort of passion into something that you're good at, and then following through with it, right, and actually do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And that's effectively the Ikigai and the four questions that you ask in a
Hmm.
nutshell. So, what's your passion? It's the first thing.
Yeah.
Second of all, this is the important one, which sometimes is a lot of self-awareness is, are you actually any good at it?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, you
Three,
can
yeah,
go on.
I was going to say, sorry,
That's
three,
fine.
does the world need that? And number four, most importantly in today's world is
Yeah.
can you make a living off it?
Yeah, no, exactly right. I think that's it's an important one, as we're all kind of in this you know, hyper competitive environment, it seems, right? And it seems to be getting even more so like that, right? That somehow you have to master the skills of monetization, right? People willing to pay for the time that you put into this passion or
Of course, and I think one of the key things there is, especially when I talk to people in and around this idea of sales, because it's got a bad
Mhm.
stigma, bad reputation and
Sure, yeah.
connotations to it. However, if you've got a great quality product, within reason, that product's going to sell itself.
Hmm.
All your job, or like I would say to people, is all your job is to explain about the product. So just explain the features, explain the benefits, whatever buzzwords you want to use. And as long as they resonate with you and your values, you're
Hmm.
gonna you're gonna buy the product.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
And
that's it. And a part of it is obviously, you know, jumping over all the hurdles that come your way as well, right? So, showing up, sure, that's part of it, but actually getting through everything, and making the right decisions, right? Almost on a kind of micro level, right?
yes,
And it's not, I don't think it's easy to know and make the right decisions, right? Choose the correct path, essentially, right? And we have that
yeah, which is
power to do
yeah,
so.
no, I understand what you're saying, and it's just that idea of especially evolving over the last few years in terms of my own self-development, kind of
Hmm.
changing philosophies. It's that
Yeah.
if we live life with no judgment and there is no
Mhm.
right and wrong, all
Yeah.
it is you're just choosing to have an experience.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, the perspective changes slightly. It's like a little bit pressure weight, lifted off the
Yeah.
shoulders, if you like, and it's
Mhm.
just is that all it is? Because if you ask the question, which I often do for myself, I'm like, who is actually qualified to judge you in terms of the decisions that you make?
Yeah. Well, yourself and the eternal spirit, or whatever you want to call it, right?
So within reason, no one's
Mhm.
qualified, yet we keep looking for their approval, if that makes sense to a certain
Mhm.
degree. So it's a very fascinating way of thinking,
Yeah.
um, to the point where
No.
now, yeah, I was going to say, so it's
Go on.
that, I mean, anytime I'm coaching somebody, as you know, this is the caveat. First of all, there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong, because whatever you choose to do,
Hmm.
it's entirely up to you because it's your life. It doesn't affect me in the slightest. And also, it's that very simple, how do you, I mean, learning, constantly evolving, always looking at, new ways to coach people, new
Hmm.
modalities, new ways of
Yeah.
thinking. It's that very simple idea of how do we just keep things, stupid simple, as we call it.
Hmm.
And does it really revolve around these 2 points, which is create awareness and empower choice?
Hmm.
So this is my very basic kind of way of reframing. So anytime I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm like, let's, and a lot of this comes from having three children,
Hmm.
which you can relate to, is anytime they come in with a struggle or an issue or a problem, it's how do I create enough awareness because they don't understand. So naturally, once they start to understand, they're more likely to start to choose the outcome of whatever it is that they desire, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's empowering them with the knowledge, right? The correct knowledge, right? To that enables those correct choices and the more optimal experience, basically, right?
Yeah, and I think the
Ultimately.
big thing is not to get lost in that idea, isn't it? Is that it's their experience as well. It's not mine.
Mhm. Sure,
So
yeah,
just
absolutely, right.
so, to empower them to make their own choices, and then naturally they're going to experience whatever it is. Not to necessarily say I would have done that. However,
Mhm.
it's not again, it's not really related to me, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, with your children, it's obviously you're more deeply connected to them, right? And it's a strong connection, so you have a kind of responsibility, but at the same time, you know, the classic phrase is that you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink, right? Or it drink.
Exactly that, yes.
And you know, the best you can do, which is always a part of what your decision making, it should be, right, is empowering them with the knowledge of what you certainly from your experience, right, what feel is correct
Yeah.
or less correct, or what the optimal path is from your experience, and giving them that knowledge, and then ultimately it's up to them, right? And that doesn't mean you're always right. I mean, obviously they bring I think the youth bring a fresh perspective always, right, to something. They kind of have this different connection to the world in a way
Yeah.
where they have a fresh view on it, right, based on their own,
Of course. And I think
having less entrenched habits, perhaps, right? Have a more fresh perspective on what's going on, and can even, yeah, maybe improve on the whole decision making and path choice, that kind of thing, right? But yeah, that's all you can do, right? Obviously, you don't want to see them fail or make bad decisions, and but ultimately, they will choose their own path as well, right?
And I was going
Overcome.
to say, and I think that's the key is from my standpoint, it's just to be there for them to know that you're there to support them. There is no
Yeah.
judgment. There's no right or wrong. You've chosen to do something. You've now had that experience. And if you
Yeah.
didn't enjoy it, you're less likely to do it again. And if you did enjoy it, you're more likely to do it
Yeah.
again. And it's really that simple.
hmm Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because it's an interesting part of the whole concept, right? The choosing the experience, right? And that's really ultimately what we're doing, right? It's life is an experience, right? You are the master of your own movie, basically, right? You're the main actor, director, executive producer of your own film in many ways, right? I mean, I'm not a fan of framing anything like the sort of the Matrix or these kind
Hmm.
of things in life, right? The simulation theory, this kind of stuff. I don't,
Hmm.
I think that kind of belittles the experience in a way, right? Or tries to frame it in a certain way, maybe with predetermined ideas
Yes.
and stuff. But really, your experience is yours, right? And you're the director. You're directing your experience, and ultimately, you have to live with the choices of the consequences of your choices, right?
No, and I think that's a very good point. And it's that idea of, first of all, it's that, if that's to be true, let's say we go along with the idea that we are a star of our own movie. How
Yeah.
many people have got the awareness of that? How many people want to be the star of their own movie? Or
hmm
how many of them just want to be in the background or behind the
Yeah,
scene?
yeah.
And it's just that idea of, if this is your film, your life is your film, you're
hmm
choosing now to just be in the, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
However, if you give it a little bit of awareness, like I was saying before, and you start to choose and say, hang on a second, maybe it is about me. Maybe I'm allowed to be the star. Maybe I'm allowed
hmm
to, have that self-awareness, that self-love, that focus. Maybe I can change the course of this movie.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, in the end, right, when you really think about it deeply, that's all you can do, right? I mean, you can influence other people, of course, right? You have that power to influence people, but ultimately your main power is influencing yourself, right? And having that sort of symbiotic relationship between your mind and body to, make correct choices, with whatever you do, right? And I mean, one interesting part of that, right, just to sort of shift it a little bit maybe is with food and sort of consumption choices, right? Especially as I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I did publish since last year, right? Or only a few months ago, publish a food on diet, right? On food and lifestyle. I call it the frequency diet, right?
Yes, sounds amazing.
And even though it sounds a bit mystical and things make you think like it's about some sort of sound and stuff, obviously I connected it to that, right? But frequency really, is how frequently something happens, right? Like obviously it's associated with sound waves mostly because it's it's judged by its pitch, and how big the sound waves are, right? Which is
Mhm.
frequency, but frequency really is how frequently something reoccurs, right? And you know the book was very much really about not just about food and diet, but also about lifestyle and choosing you know, what you do in everyday life and avoiding toxins, and a modern kind of twist on making consumption choices, right? Where obviously you don't want to sort of be antisocial, um, and kind of alienate yourself from the world, right? By making the most optimal choices of only eating fruit and vegetables all day. And if you go to a friend's house, turning down their lovely cooked meal because
Yes.
you're stuck on your diet. So it's about just doing it, empowering people with the knowledge of what's best and what's optimal, but doing it as frequently as feasible without alienating yourself from friends and family. Because obviously, a key part of health is not only what you consume, but your social standing and your connection to others, right? So, yeah, it's I've kind of related the philosophy into that, and the whole book builds upon a lot of the work from my father, and he had a health book. So I've kind of built on that, but put a sort of modern twist onto it, right? And so, what do you
No.
think? Like I think we touched on it last time, right? It's like, well, okay, eat, obviously the optimal consumption on food and drink is just drinking, eating, watery fruits and organic vegetables, but not realistic, right? In the modern age and with modern lifestyles, right?
And I think you've got a great philosophy there in terms of the
Hmm.
book, and I think it's very apparent. And one of the big things I would say to just to emphasize, and I'm sure you relate to this, is that it's that real reminder for people to empower themselves to take responsibility for
Hmm.
themselves, to
Yeah.
think about what it is that they're eating, think about how often they're eating,
Hmm.
and learning and rebuilding that relationship with themselves, because what foods might work for you won't necessarily work for them.
Hmm.
And it's really just creating that
I think so, yeah.
relationship. And everybody is unique. So why do we feel that we have to copy everybody else? Yeah.
Hmm.
So like everybody's got a favorite fruit, for example. So just
Yeah.
because you like bananas doesn't mean I have to. But
Hmm.
then at the same time, you might tell yourself, I have to like bananas, but then it has a, detrimental effect to your body.
Yeah, no. I think, and I touch on that in the book, right? I
Yeah.
say, you know, that firstly, I think it's in general better to go for local seasonal fruits and vegetables, right? So if you're in, a cold, rainy climate, for example, maybe a citrus fruit or pineapple or whatever that's grown in in a tropical island, maybe all year round, is not the right way to go, right? But that said, it's about priorities as well. So is it better to have a pineapple in a cold environment than no pineapple at all, right? Or a non-organic pineapple than no pineapple at all. And well,
Yeah.
of course, it's better to have some fruit than not have it at all, right? Depending on other factors, of course. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, priorities are key. I think seasonality is key, but also, like based on your sort of history where you live and family and things like that, right? So if your
Of course.
family, has run a dairy farm for generations, maybe giving up cheese and milk maybe isn't a good idea for you, right? It's individual,
Yes.
because maybe that's the way that you've evolved in such a way to be used to consuming dairy, for example.
Yeah.
So don't try and be afraid of it or resist it, right? It's part of you. Obviously, it depends, right? But yeah, it's individual. It's kind of empowering you with these sort of thought-provoking aspects that are not necessarily given out there, right? I mean, even now on so-called health Twitter, right? It's getting a lot of views, right? They're sort of letting health Twitter, natural health stuff go a little bit, right? And
Hmm.
I'm on there trying to write, correct a lot of things on there, right? But yeah, on there they a lot of the stuff that really gets a lot of traction is very simplistic. It's just, oh, this food is better for this, but it's like, well, is it better for you, and is it better in your environment based on your individual circumstances, right? And this is what I'm trying to help people
Yeah,
think
nice.
about more. It's like, well, think about yourself, what's good for you, what works for you, and yeah, if you eat a banana, like you said, and you have a reaction to it, then sure, listen to your body, right? The most important indicator, mostly for health, and adjust accordingly, right? Learn to listen.
Exactly that. And I think like if we link it to what we were talking about, it's that idea, isn't it? Is that you're creating an understanding, so you're creating awareness around certain foods,
Mhm.
and depending on your experience, depends on
Yeah.
your choice going forward. So it's
Mhm.
again, it's that idea, how do we just keep things really, really simple
Yeah.
whilst, and I appreciate it's not easy, but just remove that judgment. Because how
Mhm.
many times, and labels, I know it's a slightly different conversation, is a bit of a pain point for myself, but if you label yourself as, let's say, not eating meat, so
Mhm.
then you then create this pattern or this belief in your mind, and then, like you
Yeah.
said, you go and see some new relatives, or you're going
Mhm.
for a really family
Yeah.
occasion, and all of a sudden you're now saying, "Well, actually, I don't eat meat." But
Yeah.
you could eat meat for that one meal to the
Yeah.
point where because it's just a choice, just to
Mhm.
enjoy that experience that little bit more, and the effort and the thought process going into that, to the point where it doesn't define me as a person. It just means on that particular day, I made a different decision because I wanted to have a different experience.
Mhm. Yeah, and it depends, right? Obviously some people are very passionate, when it comes to, say, animal cruelty or whatever, right? And then that's fine, and then you have strong passions. But yeah, I think don't ostracize yourself, for no good reason, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's better just to go with it because health, yeah, I think, you could argue that half of it is to do with, your social and extending and your experience with others, basically, right? Half of your health and kind of well-being is how you interact with others, right? And making sure that you don't leave unnecessary or unjustified resentment to other
Yeah.
people. you know, if you go around just making everyone resentful, it doesn't matter how many organic apples, seasonal apples you eat, right? Everyone's directing negative energy at you, you know. It's probably not a good idea, you know. Like you can test that, of course, test that theory yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, but you know, from my experience, you know, I think yeah, don't make other people unnecessarily resent you, basically, right? You know, for no good reason, you know, and
Yeah, and I
having a
think
bit of meat, certainly if you enjoy it, right? It's like, you know, if you actually enjoy the smell and the taste of meat and the food comes out and it smells great, just have a bit, you know, like as long as you have no sort of moral, it doesn't go against your, you know, strong moral beliefs or your
yeah, yeah,
business or
yeah.
something like that, you know, like your income earning potential, then fine. Just don't beat yourself up about it, right?
No, of course, and then it goes into, that kind of wider topic, doesn't it? In terms of, your values, who you identify as a person, are they
Hmm.
yours
Yeah.
or are they learnt beliefs? And it opens up a whole world of, I would say conversation in
Hmm.
terms of that. And
Yeah.
it's just, I would just generally just take it back to that idea of, you're the star of your movie.
Hmm.
What experience do you want to have today? And it's
Yeah.
just really that simple without
Hmm.
the judgment from anyone else because they're not qualified to judge you
Yeah.
effectively. Because, they're playing their role in their own
Hmm.
movie. And a lot of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time we forget that people are more interested in their own movie than our own.
Often, yeah. And yeah, in that example, right, you basically can say, no, I'm not eating any meat, and you know, kind of sit there awkward
Yeah.
and kind of feel this negative energy, right, in the room for the next half an hour, whatever it may be. Or you can just, you know, like I guess swallow it, I guess, right? Yeah, excuse the pun.
Yeah.
And you just, you know, with an old family member or friend, whatever it may be, and you just sit there and have a great experience, right? Both of you, right? And you know, like I said, as long as it's not any deep philosophical thing, right? You're not going to get me to use chemical sunscreen, for example, right?
Yes, of course not.
You know, I will, you know, fight on that hill, let's say. But you know, yeah, providing it's something that's you know you don't have anything strongly against, then you get to it's you basically you have the power, right, to choose that two different experiences in that for that day, right? And who knows
Exactly.
what the you know whether that sort of sets you off on a different parallel path forever, or if it's just for that day. I guess we don't know that, right? But um, it's a fascinating example to
No,
present.
and it's true. And then linking back obviously to the cream, but it's that same idea.
Hmm.
If you don't educate people and you don't give them enough understanding,
Hmm.
all they do is just copy what they've been told.
Sure, yeah.
And a lot of the time people don't realize because they don't know. So once you give them that education and you explain to them that the difference between using A product as opposed to B product
Hmm.
and the impact that it can have on your body, and if you actually start to reconnect and start to pay attention, what you are now doing is one, educating them, but two, but you're empowering them to make a choice. So
Hmm.
they can either choose what they feel now is because they've been educated is a better choice for them, or equally, because we're not in control of their choice, they could still choose to use something that's not.
Hmm. Yeah, sure, yeah.
However, at least now they know.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the important part, right? And it links back to, you know, taking the horse to the water, right? You know, it's the same kind of thing, right? The best you can do is just express it, choose how to express it, right? And we touched on that last time, I
Yes.
remember, right? It's like choosing your words and your phrases sensitively in such a way that doesn't
Yeah.
come across as overbearing, you know, and approaching it in the right way. But yeah, I mean, on that topic of kind of just awareness, right? I think even here in Switzerland on health, right, linking it back to everything, I guess, right, is that there's lots of things like, you know, raw milk, for example, right, or pasteurized milk, you know, and many other things like when it comes or plastic packaging with food and things like that,
Mm.
right? You know, I think if you really manage to educate a lot of the Swiss people who have this sort of deep, you know, feel a deep responsibility and care towards their personal health
Mm.
and environment and things like that, if you really, you know, explain to people how, you know, heat wrapping or vacuum packing meat in plastic, right? You know, really nice Swiss meat in plastic. You know, it's probably putting microplastics in there or some, you know, certainly there's a good chance that is,
Yeah.
or the pasteurizing milk, or, you know, it basically takes a lot out of the beneficial bacteria potentially, right? From the end product. Doesn't make it as nutritious.
Yeah.
then I think, they would listen, right, and have changed. But I think most people just are not really aware of this, right? And it's how do you get that message out? And I think it's starting to filter through, right? And like even with Twitter, I'm seeing a lot more of this kind of messaging getting through. There's a lot of obviously, information that's incorrectly presented, right, from my view, but I guess it's individual as
Yeah.
well. And really, yeah, I think getting people more aware of this and making them change their consumption patterns and choices will help enact change, right? Because really, we're all connected, and if we all move in a certain way, then that will make change, right? And
And of course, and this is, linking back again, isn't it? Again, that
Mhm.
stupid simple, just it's empowering a choice. Just choose
Yeah,
something different. So rather than
yeah,
go to your local supermarket where we don't really know where the meats come from, or go to your local butcher, support
hmm
your high street.
yeah,
Know, you know, a little bit, or have more of an idea where that
yeah.
piece of meat has come from.
And if he wraps it in plastic, then ask him to wrap it in some paper, right? If
Yeah.
that's what you're concerned about. I mean, obviously everything depends, but yeah, that's really and yeah, and even with the frequency diet book, right? I really tried to try and explain everything and put wording that was just to make you question your habits, right? Question your choices, and
Nice.
and and, and yeah, just to make you think about where all the potential toxins could come in,
Mm.
um, and not being obsessive about it, but just being conscious of it, and then trying to make the more optimal decisions more often, more frequently, basically, right? That's the
Yeah. And again, it's that idea of, anytime there's change, it's always going to be difficult because you naturally have that resistance because you've got those old behaviors, those old patterns. But
hmm
like I say to everybody, just because you create an awareness and you're trying to choose, it doesn't by default mean you're going to change. It just means
yep
you've got more awareness around that. So let's say hypothetically, I don't know, you're eating something that's no good for you. If you
hmm
continuously do it, there will be a point because you keep reminding yourself, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Or actually, it doesn't make me feel good. Or you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, that doesn't work. Eventually, you'll get to a point, a day where you'll choose not to eat it. And
hmm
then it's having that self-awareness to say, oh, actually, you know what? I actually feel better. Maybe it is because of that. And then you
oh yeah
start to then slowly start to change your behaviors. But there'll always be a time where something will come up, like in a family event or so on and so forth, and you eat
hmm
something without realizing, and you're like, oh, but that's okay too.
yep
Because there's no, like, again, there's no right or wrong or judgment. It's just doing
Mhm.
what feels best for you at that time. And naturally, over time, we change, don't we? Our taste buds change, our
Yeah,
preferences change,
sure.
products
I think things
change.
can change, right? What may be
Yeah.
good for you or all of us one day actually can change, and then being open-minded to open to change and changing your ideas, right? And
Exactly
adapting
that. I mean, if you
to
look at
what's
the
changed, right?
biggest, I was going to say the biggest campaigns, in recent years, probably prior to our time, but smoking is a great example.
Sure,
You
yeah.
know, regardless of, in terms of the advertising and this, that, and the other, obviously we now know it not to be true. But if you were living during that period, you were
hmm
doing it because you told it was actually a beneficial for you, a
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah, and there's a nuance there as well, right? Because there is some evidence that 100% natural organic tobacco leaf, right? Probably has some benefits, right? I mean, it's a plant, it's a leaf, a
Yes.
plant at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And there's potential that has some benefits. Obviously, when it's highly processed and literally thousands of chemicals, right, have been put into it, not only in the tobacco itself, but in the paper and the
Yeah.
filters made out of some sort of plastic, right? Then you're introducing all sorts of other toxins. And I actually put a small section on smoking in the book, right? About how there is a big nuance and difference between that. Obviously, that brings up an interesting topic, which you touched on, the knowledge, and actually doing, using your knowledge to actually improve yourself, right?
Yeah.
Or keep choosing to harm yourself, right? Because I think, yeah, often, you are your own biggest enemy, basically, right? The biggest enemy is yourself, right? And even though you may know that smoking is bad for you, or smoking cigarettes, commercial, highly processed cigarettes are harmful to you, but you keep doing it, right? So and most people maybe even know that, yeah, of course, organic, fresh fruit and vegetables is the optimal choice and just eating that, but you want to get that pleasure from having a sweet or, some bread or whatever it is, right? Pasta. Um, and just trying to make that more optimal choice more frequently as possible, right? Not beating yourself up about it, being aware of being more aware of it and conscious of it, and choosing to overcome your own challenges, right?
Yeah, and I
For
think
me,
that's it. And
it's
it leads into it nicely, isn't it? Like I say, and I'm conscious, obviously, naturally, I repeat myself, but it's that real simple idea of just, just have the experience and then just reflect on that experience by
yeah.
creating more awareness and say, you know what? Did I enjoy that? Did I not? How do I feel? Did I make a fool of myself? Did I not? Was
Yeah.
it okay? Did I enjoy it? And it
Yeah.
doesn't define you as a person. It's just you experiencing. It's helping you make your mind up to
Hmm.
then have more evidence to, let's say, make a next decision or whatever, for the
Exactly. Yeah.
next experience that you're going to have. And it's
So
trying
don't.
not to be
Go
too harsh and too critical on yourself.
That's it. I think that's the point, right? Don't beat yourself up, right? It's like, okay, look, I know that wasn't the optimal choice again, right? If it's something you repeating doing, right? But just try and, overcome it, right? If it's something like, oh, I must have a beer on a Friday night, just go one Friday night without any beer, right? Or any wine. And then once you kind of wake up on Saturday with a clean head and it's like, oh wow, I feel great. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's one of my own personal challenges, right? It's kind of, trying to overcome alcoholic consumption. But yeah, it's for me, and I'm now looking at, different sort of options, right? Certainly sulfites, I think, is one in alcohol, right? So certainly, sorry, wine. Um, I've always been one for choosing more natural beer, right? And certainly
Hmm.
back in the UK, being the odd one out, right? Seven Stellas and one Beck's, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's brewed naturally, right? I'm going to choose that, right? But and also half the amount as a pint, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's overcoming your own challenges, right? And for me, it's surprising how other things kind of fall into place when you just make that one crucial decision that maybe is your biggest weakness, perhaps.
Mhm.
And once you overcome that, you just strangely, as beautiful as life may be, other things start happening that you didn't expect or couldn't have wished otherwise for, right? And it's amazing how that can happen, right? How kind of perfect life can be like that, right? It's just um and yeah, it's all individual, right? But it could be anything, right? But I think a lot of people don't even know what that something they're doing that could be causing them harm, right? I spoke to someone recently, and it's in the book as well about these coffee capsules, for example, right? They're very convenient, right? And obviously question anything that's convenient.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you do. It's like, wow, this is so convenient.
Yes.
As soon as you think that, question it. It's like, oh, why is it convenient? What's in this convenience, right? That's making that's so convenient. And yeah, the coffee capsules thing is one that's I think a big one, right? Um, and there's different ones now, and I think there's more ones that are maybe more biodegradable or natural, perhaps.
Mm.
But a lot of them capsules are made out of plastic or aluminium, right? And each time they're pierced, small fragments of that will go into your drink, right? And if it's something you do every day, or two or three times a
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
then that's
You're
something
right.
even more to question, right?
Yeah, of course. I think you're right. And it's just again just creating this awareness, having these conversations with people, and just like I
Hmm.
say,
Talking
not to
through it,
say
yeah.
that you can't have that, but just to
Hmm.
let you know that each time you have that, you're potentially digesting more than just the coffee.
Hmm. And it depends, right? It's possible, and like I said, I think some of them are producing more natural ones now, perhaps, but as awareness sort of creeps in.
Of
But
course.
yeah, it really depends, right? And what
Of course. But which is interesting as well, is I'm sure you found it as well, depending on how you drink your coffee. But I'm like,
Mhm.
you can actually taste the difference.
Yeah, no, for sure, right? Yeah, so coffee is one vice, I guess some people call it toxin. Is one I'm not shaking at the moment, right? I mean, I'm also trying to sort of improve my physique at the moment as well, and it certainly helps me there in that process. But even the times I've stopped drinking coffee,
Hmm.
right? It will take, I will get headaches if I don't
Mm.
have a coffee, right, for one day, right? If I
Yeah.
if I go one day without, it's 1 to 2 days,
Hmm.
then I'll start getting headaches, right? You have to kind of wean yourself in, which shows you kind of how powerful kind of substance it is, right? But I'm trying to do it optimally. I go for organic coffee, right?
Yeah, nice.
I've got now an espresso machine that has no plastic parts, so they tell me. Right. So it's or
Yeah.
certainly no, where the hot water touches, right? So where the water,
Yes.
the heated water only touches stainless steel parts.
Mhm.
Um, so at least I'm trying to reduce the amount of additional toxins that are in it, right? And then, I've got even got a friend, right, in Paris who has a kind of super unique um coffee company, right? And it's actually getting coffee from the roasters
Mhm.
in so getting actual coffee producers in the local countries to roast the coffee. Because most commercial coffees, the raw beans are just sent to, say, Switzerland or
Yeah.
or America or UK, right? And they're roasted there by the local distributor and sellers, right? But actually, that's where a lot of the margin is in the roasting part. So it's kind of letting the local producers roast the coffee and then exporting that product, right? And
Yeah.
that apparently has a number of advantages and on flavor and taste and even, empowering the local producers, right? And yeah, I mean there is a difference in that coffee, right? And I've even got a canonical grinder, right? That you to grind those beans.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's super premium, right? But yeah, it's it's definitely it tastes better, right? Yeah, like you said, you can taste the difference. It's kind of um a less bitter taste, right?
And I think if you were to link that again to this idea of, empowering yourself or your person, that is one thing, key things that we have is taste. And a lot of the time it's almost like
Mhm.
people forget that. Because you can
Yeah.
taste the difference between a real piece of fruit or not. You can taste like it's
Hmm.
not coincidence when you go to, on holiday in the sun and you can taste how fresh the vegetables are,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, as opposed to something that you got from your local supermarket. And sometimes I think we just take things and we see them as opposed to really kind of, take the time to test and just feel how they are
Yeah. And it's being
literally.
conscious again, right? Being conscious of who you are
Mm.
and listening to your body and its senses, right? I mean, taste in French and Latin, right, is sense, basically, right? It's the same word, right? Which is interesting, you know. And yeah, listening to your senses, right? And certainly if your body reacts to something, then that's really time to listen, right? If
Yeah.
your body will quickly tell you what's good and what's not, right? And yeah, I think there's a big thing in taste, and as I sort of mentioned in the book as well, right? That's work to go with, right? And what you said is if you like something, then go for it, right? If you buy organic apples because you read somewhere that apples are great for this and great for that, but you buy them and never eat them and they go moldy
Yeah.
in the fridge, right? Then don't buy them again. It's not working for you, right?
Yeah.
For whatever reason they sit in the fridge and you don't eat them, then don't buy it again, right?
Yeah.
It's going what works for you. I mean, the reason I sort of erred on Apple, right, is because I think apples, right, they're the one thing, even organic ones, right? You buy them and they can sit in the fridge for months, right, and not decay one bit, which is highly
Worrying.
questionable in my view,
Yeah.
right? You know,
For sure.
because they should decay, right? If you go to an apple tree just in the forest, right, if
Yeah.
that still exists, and just pick one and leave it out on the side, a few days that should start decaying, right? But
Yeah, no, you're right.
you know,
100%. And it's one of those key things, isn't it? When you're eating, is that idea, if it doesn't rot, then there's something wrong with it.
yeah.
It's just a natural process.
Well, and this is why now I'm starting to increasingly take the skin off of even organic apples, let's say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because and we don't know, right? But certainly there is some evidence to suggest that in international waters, right, you can do certain things that are not allowed in on land, basically, right?
Yeah.
In country jurisdictions, right? Which is like irradiating, perhaps, right? There's certain methods apparently that can be done on international waters like that. Irradiating fruits or just spraying something on the skin, right? I mean, certainly
Yeah.
we know with lemons they get waxed, right? And that obviously stops the decaying and stops it from perishing so quickly.
Hmm.
Um, which means certainly for lemons, don't put lemon zest in your drink, right? If it's been waxed off, question that, let's say, um, because you don't know what other kind of contaminants you're adding to your consuming basically, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and this is what I say really. It's like, well, okay, just because something's organic and it says organic doesn't mean like you can instantly trust it and it's okay, right? What's organic in one country has a different certification and standards that may be in another country, right?
Yeah.
And it's more about, and really what I conclude, right? It's actually, and I concluded it during the research as well, as I was finishing the research for the book, right? It's all about quality and source. So it's not just about arbitrary labels, right? And I guess
Yeah.
this can relate to life as well in a way, right? But it's like, what is the quality and source of that thing, right? That you're choosing and consuming, and can you trust it, right? And
Yeah.
and really, it comes down to that. It's not just what is it and what it's labeled as. It's, well, what is the quality and the source of it, right? And can you trust it?
And I think that's a very good point. And again, it's just that, again, all we can do is just, take an interest,
Mm-hmm.
try and get as much understanding and create as much as awareness as possible to the point
Yep.
where we now feel more empowered to make a different choice, a choice
Mhm.
that is better and that's more in alignment with ourselves.
Yep. And I
As
think
it,
that's it, right? Most people that work for big companies or even, say restaurants or whatever, they're just not, they're bombarded with other information and pictures and images and other prioritized information, right, all day long, whether through social media or traditional media, that they simply haven't had the time to even look into certain topics, right? Whether it be, cosmetics or food or whatever, right? And toxins and stuff. And yeah, just all you can do, right, is try and elevate your own spread knowledge, right? And that's a good subject, right? Is it really our purpose, if we have the knowledge to spread it amongst as many people as possible, or just kind of gatekeep it, right? There's two different ways, right? You can kind of gatekeep information, right, and keep all the alpha to yourself, or try and help and spread that information to as many people as possible, right? It's an interesting conundrum.
it is, and I suppose the analogy that comes to my mind straight away is if you're working in I don't know, in your profession,
Hmm.
and you're the person with all the knowledge.
Hmm.
Rather than share that knowledge and upskill your colleagues and your team and create that environment that's winning, do you just keep it all to yourself to the point where I'm now the go-to and it's all about ego and
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
you pay this much or blah blah blah, or is there more empowerment through sharing that?
Well, yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, I've worked in a large corporate environment, right? And certainly it's the former, right? Everyone's gatekeeping the information. Um, and really, I think it's encouraged in a way, right? Because those that do that and have that more aggressive approach, they're the ones that seem to move up the corporate ladder quicker, basically, right? So there's kind of a narcissistic kind of culture in a lot of these places, I think, or it can be there, basically, right? Obviously it depends, right?
Hmm.
Everything's different, but certainly so I've noticed in some larger corporate environments where yeah, that's kind of there. Whereas that's never been my really philosophy, right? More, if someone asks me a question, I'll explain it, right? And I'll tell them exactly all the intricacies of it and how best to do it, right? Probably to my own detriment in some ways, right? I think you can only go so far maybe in some of these environments with that kind of attitude. But I just think it's like the right thing to do. Obviously, it depends, right? There's certain information you don't want to divulge, of course, right? Without kind of doing yourself too much self-harm, and I'm being general, but yeah, it's two different ways, right? But I think otherwise, if it comes to running your own business, and that knowledge obviously would help that business thrive and succeed, then of course you're incentivized, directly to share the knowledge, right? And
Of course, and
yeah,
it goes back to, there's lots of things that we could kind of tail off of this, but I just
Mhm.
think still it's that idea of any time that you've asked somebody something and
Mhm.
they've empowered you with some information or something that you feel has played a crucial part of your life or the way that you think or the
Yeah.
choices that you make now, that's priceless information.
Mhm.
And if you could offer that just to one person, I mean, how
Yeah.
empowering is that?
I mean, certainly if it's information that's beneficial and super helps you, then of course those closely connected to you, it makes sense to share that, right? I mean, it's actually a responsibility to share that those that are most closely connected to you, right? At least tell them, right? If they don't listen, then what more could you have done, right? You can't force it down their throat, basically, right? And drag them to the right decision or whatever that may be. But yeah, I think there's a responsibility there, as people that are sort of you're less connected with, and there's an interesting paradigm, I guess, there with social media now, which
Mm.
is everyone has a platform to be able to broadcast their message, right, or information. Um, then does it make sense? And in some ways, the world will stop you doing it, right? Certainly with social media guidelines these days, right? It's certain information is not only instantly kind of thwarted, right? You're almost not allowed to share certain information, right? If it would somehow affect too many people, and that somehow would doesn't benefit the few that maybe have power over these some of this information, right? So it's an interesting, but it's not just like, well, why is the world stopping that information being spread too wide, right? I mean,
Of
would
course.
it cause too much chaos? I don't know, right? It's an interesting philosophical sort of
No, and I think you're right, and I
line.
think that obviously touches in social media as a whole,
Hmm.
as in terms of what's that actually playing a part for,
Hmm.
what is the media role, what's responsibility for many, many things, and
Yeah.
it can definitely go into hours of conversation and create awareness in and around that. However, it's
Yeah.
just still that idea of, if we keep it simple and let's not worry about stuff that we can't control. Let's
Oh,
just focus
sure.
the things that we can control. And the things that we can control is that we are, like you said, if it's from a place of responsibility, I have got, information which is beneficial to
Yeah.
you, which I feel that you need to know. Whether or not you choose to do it, it's fine. However, if you choose to do it and you see the benefit, then naturally you're more inclined now to pass that on to somebody else.
Hmm. Yep. But if it's a topic that, say, yeah, you keep bringing up and it keeps causing,
Mhm.
negativity, let's say, even those with your closely loved ones, then maybe just don't even mention it anymore, right? It's one of those things. It's just they don't want to know this one. For whatever reason, there's a deep entrenched kind of you know thing that doesn't want them that doesn't want them to accept this information, and maybe that's fine. That's fine for them, right? You're passionate, you believe it, you know it, whatever it may be. But if someone else just doesn't want to accept it, then maybe it's not beneficial to keep kind of choosing to
I
to
agree.
mention.
I agree, and I think that's there's a slight nuance to it, isn't it? It's that idea. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just giving you a suggestion and say you
Mhm.
could try it.
Yeah, yeah.
And nine times out of ten in these examples, if it's something that you practice and you believe in, then they can see that it works. They can see the
Mhm.
benefit because they're seeing it from you. So, for example, you mentioned earlier about, that you're actively choosing to get healthier and fitter,
Mhm.
albeit going for the gym or, running.
Mhm.
Eventually, if you were to have a conversation about the benefits of, let's say, going to the gym or running, they don't have to listen necessarily or do what you're saying. However, they will be able to see in person the
Mhm.
effects that that has because it's had it on yourself. So
Yeah,
you effectively are the example.
yeah, and again, I put this quote in the book, right? Be the change you want to see around you. I mean, and it ties into everything we've just said, right? It's like, well, you can sit there and try and influence everybody else and make everyone else listen to you, but actually, the best thing you can do is just be the change yourself. Do everything you can do, which is really your ultimate power, right? That you have, um, to do the best, even when no one else is around, even when no one else is looking, right? That's probably the most important part, right? That it is when no one else, or you feel that no one else can see it, is looking, then also be that be the message, right? Don't, and I think that's a key part of life, is not being hypocritical, right? It's and actually put this, I've got some new books coming out as well, right? This new children's storybooks, right? And this is one of the morals that I put in there, basically, right? Is like, you know, if you're really telling everyone else to do something, then make sure you're doing it yourself, right? If that's something you really believe in and you really know, then you have to be the example of that, right? And I think that's where, I'm making this extra effort now to really be, you know, well, basically cut down the alcohol, basically, right? Is the main one for me, right? Um, and seek alternatives, right?
Mm.
And yeah, that I think that's where if I'm now basically, want to be a part of a large company that embodies purity and natural living and using natural products, then I have to really, really be the example of that, I think, to make it succeed. And right. And that's, for my philosophy, right? I think is well, that's the best I can do, right? It's
Cool.
the best I can do is that be the example myself and then watch everything fall into place around me, right? That's
Cool.
the
And then I would
that's
just
the
say,
philosophy I'm testing anyway.
I was going to say, yeah, but then also I would
Go
just offer a slight invitation there
on.
where it's that, remove that judgment from yourself. Just
Hmm.
be you. Don't
Yeah.
worry about the consequences. Don't worry about what people think because your natural passion
Hmm.
and your flair for everything that
Hmm.
you stand for is going to come across through you, and then it's
Yeah.
going to come across through your brand anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think I think that's it. I mean, with the alcohol now, I've just discovered this new sort of fermented grape juice that's really nice.
Nice.
I've not even heard of it before. It's funny how these things just appear suddenly, right?
Yes.
But it's a seasonal, apparently autumnal, type of drink they drink in Switzerland, right? And I do kind of talk about this in the book, right? Where, most commercial alcohols basically are sort of fermented and brewed with a very aggressive yeast, basically, right?
Hmm.
It's a yeast that's sort of picked out of a catalog, essentially, right? In many ways, and that yeast basically, yeah, really creates a lot of alcohol, basically, right, from the sugars in the
Hmm.
juice or whatever. Um, and that I think that very aggressive alcohol is basically a more poisonous toxin, right? Right? 5-8%. I think that's very strong, right?
Yeah.
Where this sort of fermented grape juice maybe is 1%, 1.5%, a bit like kombucha as well, right? Where it does take the same process where, the single-celled organism consumes the sugar, right? Or sugars in
Hmm.
the drink, and that turns it into carbon dioxide and alcohol. But a kombucha, it's a very mild culture, basically, right? A yeast is a culture, right? It's a certain type of
Hmm.
culture. But that only turns it into maybe 0.8% alcohol, right? So it's a very mild alcohol. So you're still getting a nice, and actually it's known as healthy, right? And good for your liver, as opposed to, being, kind of overloading your liver with pressure from a 5% beer or even um 11, 15%
Yes.
wine, but also contains sulfites. But yeah, this drink is called like salsa, apparently, right? You know what?
Mhm.
And I've seen it more now being promoted, right?
Yes.
And certainly alongside becoming a lot more popular on the shelves, right? 0% or non-alcoholic beers and drinks and stuff. Are you seeing that in England as well, in the UK? Like,
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely a
oh,
growing trend at the moment.
yeah.
And every time you go into the local supermarket, it seems to have
Mhm.
gained another fixture or another brand, and
Sure, yeah.
you know, it continues to grow
Hmm. Nice,
effectively.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I'd caution with the non-alcoholic drinks, right? Because a lot of the time it's probably a brewed beer with those aggressive yeast, but then it's gone through another process to remove the alcohol, right? Which is probably some sort of chemical extraction,
Yeah.
depends on the individual brand and stuff, which means it's probably better to just have the beer, right? Actually, in
Yes.
some
Yeah.
ways. It depends, right? If it's a sort of, high fructose corn syrup, sugary pop, a non-alcoholic pop, then yeah, it's probably better just off to drink a sort of
And I
a
mean, and then
natural
you
beer,
link,
right?
I was just going to
Yeah.
say, and you link it back to food. It's the same kind of idea, isn't it?
Mhm.
Why have a real steak when you can have a fake steak? And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Why eat steak at all? Just do something
It,
else to eat.
yeah, again, it depends, right? And there's a lot of this sort of I'm seeing a bit of both sides, right? There's a sort of some movement towards, yeah, this sort of fake meat type stuff. And again, it depends, right? If it's a very nice natural process, like lightly processed steak that's made out of natural vegetables and not many chemicals and additives have been added, then maybe it's okay, right? If it's still nutritious and stuff. But yeah, if it's something that's made out of, some other kind of protein, let's say, that's highly processed, loads of chemical extraction to take out any parasites or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't seem like it's going to be too beneficial, right? And
Yeah.
then, but the other side of that is that yeah, certainly on this sort of health Twitter, let's say, which probably is a bit siloed anyway, but a lot of people and a lot of traction on posts about people just going for the only meat diet, right? And I think maybe it's called keto and stuff like that,
Okay,
right?
yes.
but I think that's kind of unbalanced as well, right? And you got to find a balance where, meat and processed foods is very acidic,
Mhm.
and the offset and the balance to that is, fresh vegetables and fruit, which is more alkaline, right? And the
Yeah.
sort of yin and yang as well, right? Negative and positive.
Naturally, and it's that idea, isn't it? Obviously, there's alkaline diets out there which people can follow, and it starts touching in kind of deeper levels, isn't it? But it's
Yeah,
that idea again of it's whatever works for you
I
individually.
think that's it. That's it. And that's it, right? It's like what not just, oh, this meat diet is great for me. Okay, well, you know, great, right? But if it doesn't work for you, or a balanced diet is better, then that's it. And I think it can come down to that as well, right? You sort of like the example I gave earlier. Your family's been sort of, cow farming and eating, steak and raw meat maybe or whatever, right, for centuries. Then that's probably all right. I mean, there's a good chance. It seems logical, right? That's probably a good diet for you then, right? And it's quite
Of
possible.
course, and I think the caveat to that also is the fact it's the quality of the meat also. If that
Yeah,
meat is
no.
coming from that field, across from where you live,
Yeah,
as opposed to flown halfway across the world, and contains all types of stuff, and you're talking about
yeah.
plastic and all sorts of preservatives, you don't
Mhm.
really know what you're eating.
No, yeah, and absolutely right. And I think when it comes to meat, I think it's if you're doing bodybuilding and you want to increase muscle mass, then that kind of makes sense, right? It's logical that
Yeah.
meat would be good for muscle mass, as it is basically a muscle, right? In many respects, most of it. And yeah, and I think, but the happiness of that and the happiness of that life of that meat it makes a big difference, right? And that's why there can be, you know being cautious if choosing to eat more raw meat, right? It's well, what conditions was that meat reared in, right? When it comes to like things like battery chickens, right? That's highly genetically modified. They put a lot of antibiotics in there to prevent disease, and even
Yeah.
pump it water and saline solution, right, to make it look fatter and sell it for a higher price. And there's thousands of chicken per square meter or whatever it is, right? And that meat hasn't really had a good quality of life. Then there's a good chance that energy, right, that you're consuming, right, is even flowing through through to you. So it's being really, I think, especially with meat, right? It's trying to choose something that's had a better quality of life, or at least some sort of quality of life. And I think that positive energy come through to you. And I relate it back to this sort of notion of higher vibration. I'm interested to
Yes.
see your thoughts on that, right? But organic fruit and meat and happier meats and animals have a higher vibration, basically, right? They vibrate at a higher state, a higher vibrational frequency, let's say,
Yeah.
and that will make you naturally feed into you and can make you feel happier and more content, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I 100% agree in terms of in that sense of I'm very much in the if the not label as such, but the woo-woo world of energy. It's
Yeah.
just that, again, it's this idea you are what you eat. So if you're eating something that was potentially alive, that
Yeah.
has been, the transition from, to your plate inside a couple of days as opposed to weeks, months, and years. I mean,
Yeah.
whose life is left in that product?
Yeah, exactly
Looking
right. And
at
it's
the
the life
product.
force, right? Like you said, that it's getting into the sort of more mystical, spiritual aspect,
Yeah.
or woo woo, if you like, right? But yeah, energy is never destroyed, right? It's only transferred,
Transferable, never created or
you know.
destroyed, just transferable. Exactly.
Yeah, so if the energy from another source is transferring to you, and that energy has been vibrating at a higher level and is
Exactly.
not, is still alive not too long ago. So it was vibrating more intensely and higher vibration not too long ago, then there's going to be more benefits there and to help you feel more content, right? And I think that's it. And I kind of touch on this in the book, right? Um, by making these more conscious choices about what you consume, and yeah, it's only maybe half of the equation, perhaps, that you'll just naturally start to see benefits, right? The unexpected benefits, whether, okay, maybe the improvement in your skin and your energy levels, but then you start seeing other positive effects, right? And just better outcomes in your life in general, right? Because you're just vibrating at a high level, right? And people can start looking at you different, right? It's like, you notice people looking at you. It's like, why is everyone looking at me today? And smiling at me, right? And sometimes you get that feeling, right? Not always, but it can
No,
happen.
and I think it's not coincidence. It's literally like you're saying, you're raising your frequency
Hmm.
because it's the expression, isn't it? What you put out, what you get back. So
Yeah.
if imagine your, frequency is a lot higher and you're walking out smiling,
Hmm.
naturally people are attracted to
Yeah.
you. They go, "Oh,
Absolutely, right?
what's he got that I haven't?" And
Uh-huh.
they've just
Yeah.
been drawn to you to the point you're like, "Oh, why is everyone smiling at me today?"
And you can try that, right? It's just try and act more confident and be more confident and put out a different kind of energy aura, your energy field, right? Is it toroidal field? Is it they call it? Or, that we put out. And if you have that more positive and you know, even if you're not feeling great inside, right? You can try it, right? And just try and at least try and smile, right? I mean, your face will probably thank you anyway over the long term, right? If you smile more, right? Eventually, I mean, I do it, right? Even I find myself, it's easy to just sort of frown when nothing's happening, right? Yeah, unintentionally, but at least try and raise the side of your
Yeah.
side of your mouth, right? To at least a sort of horizontal level, perhaps more often. Uh, and yeah,
And,
yeah, I think there is benefits there, right? For sure.
and of course, and it's just that, like you're saying, it's the really that subtlety. I mean, it literally happened to me last week. I was just walking along the street and someone
Mhm.
smiled at me.
Yeah.
And it made me feel nice. And I went, oh,
No.
it's really nice. That was a nice smile. It wasn't a
Mhm.
conversation and everything. I think, sorry, she was a lady was riding on a bike and we just, connected for a moment and she
Yeah.
smiled. It's like, oh,
Did it
that's really
catch you off
nice.
guard, or you instant
No,
smile
but
back, or?
I try to smile all the time, similar to yourself. But it was just that
Cool.
nice little bit of a moment, and that's
Yeah,
all it
yeah.
was. Sometimes it
Mhm.
just then lifts you that little bit, and
Yeah, yeah.
a little bit of an extra bounce in your step as you walk, and you think,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, that was nice. It
Yeah,
did
yeah,
good to
nice.
me.
It's funny, right? And literally, just putting your cheeks up, right? Like it just something as simple as that, like, can make a difference, right? And yeah, it's yeah, back to my sort of notion about this resentment, right? I try not to leave resentment anywhere, right? Or um try and make my actions not result in other people doing unnecessary energy, basically, right? It's kind of a waste of mine, perhaps, right? If I'm doing something that means other people have to do things, right? Whether something simple like not leaving litter around, right? Someone somewhere has to pick it up at some point, right? It
Yeah,
has
you're
to go
right.
somewhere. Um, but yeah, but also making people feel good, right? And I guess that comes into the sort of the broadcast and the potential with social media. Right now, we all have the chance to make one to many feel happy, right, or better, right? And I think that's where I'm trying to do some benefit now with my increased activity on social media, right? I don't know if you've seen some of it, right? I'm still trying to improve my
It's good.
the way I'm doing it. But yeah, um, I think that where it can help, right? And trying to help as many people as possible and make people feel content and happy, and hopefully and that based on the sort of equation of energy not being lost, that can feedback and help you, right?
And I think it's the perfect place to start. And I mean, again, a little invitation is obviously get rid of the word trying. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
You're just doing. You're just
Yeah, yeah.
being. And at the moment in time, you're choosing this platform to say, you know what, how can I just be and
Hmm.
share that in an environment where people can choose whether or not they wish to watch, choose whether or not they want to subscribe, choose whether or not they want to
Yeah.
like, choose or not they want to expand their own knowledge. Because we're always constantly learning, and we are now just offering them a different voice. It's very interesting, and it kind
Hmm.
of follows in the same vein of when I speak to people more recently, they're like, in your local high street, I'm not sure what it's like in Switzerland. They're like, oh my,
Hmm.
there's another coffee shop opening. There's another coffee shop, or there's another coach in my particular world. But I'm
Yeah.
like, the reason why there's coffee shops opening and the reason why there's more coaches is because there's more demand.
Hmm.
So you've got to look at it from the other perspective. So
Yeah.
even if I
Sure.
like a particular type of coffee and I've got my favorite coffee shop, as soon as one opens, I'm definitely going to go and try it because that might be more my type of scene, or that coffee might taste that little bit
Yeah.
nice. And
Yeah.
sometimes we need that little bit of variety in our lives.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's seeing life as an opportunity, right? being conscious of your experience again, right? It's like something just happened to you. You can choose to ignore it or think
Yeah.
like, what did that mean? Why, And I do this in a way when I go to if I'm for whatever reason, right, driving around, and I'm like suddenly in a different town, right? And a
Yeah.
new town, not before. Like, why am I here? Or not just why am I here? What could I do here? What opportunity do I have here, right? And kind of looking at the positive
Yeah.
aspect of it, of what you can do, right? And yeah, and actually, when I've been looking doing more research on the social media, that really comes across when you're more natural, right? And I haven't mastered this yet, so I'm not certainly not the have the experience on it. But once you look more relaxed and you're explaining things in a more relaxed way, you're creating a kind of relaxed setting and vibe, then you'll get more attention, basically, right? If that's what you're craving, essentially. Um, Whereas if you're kind of nervous and shouting, which I think some of my stuff is coming across like that a little bit at the moment, then yeah, it just resonates. There's a different frequency basically, right? That's resonating
Of
less.
course.
So
And this is the wonderful thing
yeah.
is that, even like this now, is you just, again, remove all the expectation, all the judgment, and all the
Mhm.
fears and the yes and the no's. It's just, I'm just going to come on, I'm just going to talk, I'm just going to be myself. And naturally, you're going to connect to people that resonate with you and your message anyway.
Mhm.
Because it's a
Yeah.
bit like, there could be, I don't know if I've said this to you before, but, let's say, imagine we had five different people and they're all saying exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
You're not going to listen to all five. You're going to listen
Right.
to the one of the five that you feel most attached to.
Sure.
That's simply it.
Yeah. Even though the message is the same, right?
Exactly.
It's which one resonates, right? Again, it's frequency, vibration, which one, that you feel more connected with. Yeah, that's it. And then you're going to listen, right?
Exactly. And that's not to say that throughout your life you wouldn't listen to all five, but
Mm-hmm.
you would tend to literally always, because you want to experience all five, don't you?
Hmm.
But then you will always find yourself going back to the one that resonates with you most.
Hmm.
And again, it's not right or wrong. It's just you having a different experience every time. But the key thing is, which I think is really important,
Hmm.
which is you should be proud of at this moment, is that you're being one of those five people.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people choose not to.
Yeah, no. And
So
even
to
I've
come
dealt
out
with it, yeah.
there and, it's like everything, isn't it? How does a great movie get made? It starts
Hmm.
off with an idea. It starts off with words on a
Hmm.
paper. Then it gets developed into a script. Then it gets produced. Then it has to, do you know what I mean? There's so many processes that it has to go through before
Yeah.
it becomes a film. And this is very much just a part of your process to the
Yeah.
point that as long as we're consistent and keep showing up and keep just doing you and
Mhm.
believing in your message, it's just going to continue to grow.
Yeah, and do your best every day, right? I mean, what more can you do? This is one of my favorite ones at the moment, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
nice.
I mean, obviously, what is your best, I think, is or knowing what is best, I think is one of the main challenges, right? But a lot of people feel that they're doing their best and trying their best every day, but maybe that's built on shaky foundations, right?
Yeah.
Of knowledge, or thinking thinking you know something, but actually it's a more of a belief system, right? And so it's testing your own knowledge and assumptions and habits and lifestyle and choices to see what's working, right? And listen to the feedback, right? Listen, not only the feedback from your life, but your body, but your life, right? What you keep doing something and you keep getting, you keep cutting a vegetable a certain way,
Yes.
you keep cutting your finger. Stop doing it
Yeah.
that way. I mean, like seriously, right? Well, this is this and I think that kind of analogy works in many different things, right? You keep doing something and it's not working, stop doing it, right? And
Yeah.
try something different, right? Or
Of course,
try and
definition.
improve, right? Try and reiterate and evolve and get
And
better.
I mean, there's lots of caveats. There's lots of buzzwords, lots of
Sure,
sayings
sure.
out there. I mean, just a few to come to mind straight away. So
Go
first,
on.
practice makes progress. The
Yeah,
only
no, I love
thing,
this one,
the
yeah.
only time that you ever learn is through mistakes. So you should embrace them more. But one of the big things I think, which has really resonated with me recently, and you
Hmm.
could probably relate to this, is how you do anything is how you do everything.
Hmm.
So if you just focus on that, how I show up today, how do I show up in this moment with all the things that I control and the knowledge that I have, and I apply that to everything that I do. I'm being consistent, I'm being true to myself, I'm being who I am. That's not to say that doesn't change, because
Yeah.
naturally, when we got that self-awareness and that development, we're constantly learning. However, the values and the attitude or the focus and the intention that you have is always going to be remaining the same because
Hmm.
I'm just doing everything. How I do that one thing is how I do everything.
Yeah. And I think also key to that, right, is how you justify your choices to yourself, right? And one, I think that really, I don't know if it's like something that's been ingrained into us through TV, Hollywood movies, or whatever, but it's basically trying to justify what you do to yourself because you think that someone else does it, right? It's like, oh, that guy lived to 120 smoking, so that means it's not going to harm me, but
Yeah.
don't worry about what he did. You don't know what he did.
Yeah.
You just saw, you didn't watch him 24 hours a day and saw how he smoked or what he smoked or whether he even smoked,
I was just going to say, and every other word was a cough, and he couldn't sleep, and he couldn't do this, and it's, you don't know the whole picture, do you?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, exactly right.
and this is another saying, which is, and there's similar versions of this, but it's this idea that comparison is a curse
Hmm. Yeah,
because
this is
there
it.
is simply no
Don't
value in
worry.
it.
Yeah, don't justify your own, not yeah, your own actions because you think someone else is doing something or it doesn't harm them, and if so, it must be okay for me. No, it's if you know it's wrong for you, then you need to retrain yourself to stop doing it, basically, right? Or you're getting signals, you know, from your life to change or not do it, whether it's your body telling you that you're not doing something right or something's not going well or whatever, then don't justify it because you think someone else is doing it. Like
Yeah,
it's
no, and exactly that is again this whole, and it's easy to say, but it's difficult to, or more challenging, should we say, to do is that self-awareness.
hmm Yeah,
It's
no.
how am I not judging myself? How am I making sure that I'm
hmm
not looking for acceptance and I'm just being me, knowing that when I am myself, I am naturally wonderful. I'm naturally,
hmm
benefiting my environment and the people around me to the point where, it makes them feel good.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to fall into the autonomous trap, basically, right? Of just doing things the same every day and not improving and evolving. But you know, if that's the case and you feel like you're in that kind of perpetual spiral, rat race, or whatever it is, just try and improve small things at a time. Right? What small things can you improve? And whether it's, not barging onto the train every morning if that's what you're doing, or, not trying to get in front of everyone in the car if on your commute, if that's what it is, right? Just trying to make small improvements. And then eventually I think those small improvements add up, right? It's again, and a sort of quote from Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, right? It's, don't underestimate the power of moderate effort consistently applied, basically, right?
Yeah.
Basically change the small things, one thing at a time, and then eventually you'll see other opportunities open up that you can then try to improve, right? And I think that's how it works, right? Or certainly
Yeah.
from my experience, how it works with
And I
for me,
would,
right?
and I would say that there's definitely lots of truth within that. So it's,
Hmm.
focus on those small details. But
Yep.
also I would say it's that self-awareness to know when life's offering you an opportunity. And just
Yeah,
having
exactly.
that
Yeah.
self-awareness to first of all realize it's there and then being
Hmm.
brave enough to say, you
Yeah.
know what, I'm going to have
Yeah.
this experience today.
Exactly, yeah. And it may be that girl smiling at you, right? Or whatever it may be, right? Depending on the situation.
Yeah.
And just saying hello back. Like literally hello, right? Not kind of, thinking about that TV program you watched as a teenager that got you fearful about saying hello, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it may be, right? That maybe psychologically affected you, right? And
You're
you know,
right.
just saying hello and smiling back, right? And where are you from? How are you doing today? Or whatever it may be, and not just only that, but it maybe sort of corporate engagements as well, right? That maybe that one person is you think is your ticket to the promotion or whatever it
Yeah.
may be, right?
Yeah.
You know, just go and say hello, right? I mean,
Of
what
course. I
what
mean, I
could
say to
do
a lot of
harm?
people, I mean, it's slightly off topic, but it's that idea of this belief that you're one conversation away from changing your life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe that to be true, then go and have more conversations.
Yeah, for sure, right? Yeah. Well, and it's not really about that, right? It's not putting yourself under so much pressure that this one thing is going to change your life. It's more what small things can I do, right? Every day that can improve. And then for me, it's just almost like magic, right? You'll just find yourself in front of that one person just because you improved yourself every day, small things. You made other people happier in a small way every day, right? Whether it's getting that extra cup of tea for your colleague or workmate, teammate, or whatever,
Yeah.
and making their tea as good as one you make yours, right? If that's even a thing, right?
Yeah.
You know. Um, and you'll see that opportunities will just arise, right? I mean, I guess one phrase that I like is basically luck equals opportunity plus hard work, right? You put in the work, um, and when the opportunity arises, that's when the luck will occur, right? I mean, I guess that questions the notion of what luck is in a way, right? Whether that's just the outcome of good hard work and optimal decisions and that kind of thing. But yeah, luck is a notion that everyone understands, right? So it's kind of framing it in that way. But yeah, it's
Yeah, luck's an interesting one, isn't it? Create your own luck, this and the other.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
the other invitation, I know we spoke about it last time about the words, and I think
Hmm.
sometimes it's if you're struggling to define a word, like let's say like luck or
Hmm.
trying, there's no real
Yeah.
substance to it. It's an invitation to just use a different word.
Yeah, absolutely right. I've got an interesting example with that, right? I sort of yeah, so I try to not use the word understand, right? Stand under. It's kind of like got a negative connotation with it in a way, right? But it's such a ubiquitous word, right? The commonly understood. I tried to replace it with comprehend, and
Yeah.
this person looked at me and was like, "What? Oh,
Yeah.
I mean understand." He said, "Why didn't you say that then?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh." So I was thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to do but I saw that signal was like, okay, I'm not going to do that again.
Well, what's interesting is that is
No,
really a good friend of mine
yeah,
play around with the word. So rather than understand, it's
yeah,
understand.
yeah, right, sure, yeah, yeah,
You've got that connection, or I overstand.
yeah, yeah. But
I've
again,
got
it's kind
something
of
up in
like,
my
well,
head.
it'd be interesting to try that again on the person maybe that I spoke to last time, right? And see if they're also like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you not just not saying understand?
Sure.
Like,
But you know what it's
it
like.
was in a text. It was in a text actually, and actually, I put it in a text, which maybe freaked him out a bit more, right? And then in person, he's like, "Why didn't you put understand?" He's like, he couldn't comprehend it.
There you go. The irony of it all, isn't it?
There
But
you go.
sometimes it's, as long as you say something so confidently with a lot of passion,
Yeah,
people tend to go, "Oh, yeah, of course I know."
yeah, yeah. But I
You
think
know,
with
you know
text, you
nothing.
can't always express that passion, right? When you say something. So if you put you know different types of words in a text format where someone can't see the emotion basically, right, behind it,
Of
it
course,
can easily
of
be
course.
misunderstood,
Yeah.
misunderstood. Yeah.
No, you're right. It gets lost in translation, as the expression is. But
Mhm.
is that also that idea, which I think is fascinating? So, I'm sure you speak different languages, and it's that idea of how do we translate that language
Mhm.
into English, and then realize in English, because it's quite limited, there's no word to express it. So what you try to do is find two or three words to try to explain that feeling or what it is you're trying to say, but it's never quite there
Mhm.
because it just
Yeah.
doesn't exist, and we have no awareness of what that is.
And it's really fascinating, actually, the connections you can make with the language, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the European languages, right? I speak French, understand a fair amount of Italian, and then I'm kind of surrounded by German a lot,
Yes.
right? So it's really really fascinating when you sort of trying to pick words,
Mm.
and one that's really widely connected with all of these languages, right? And one really interesting one, for example, um, is correct. So in German, it's the same word, correct, correct.
Yes.
Even in French, correct, right? You can say it. In Italian, I'm not sure actually, right? I won't embarrass myself by saying correcto, but I think you can I think you can use it like that as well. But then it's like, well, also, it means rect as well, which is right, which is also means correct,
Yes.
right. That's right. And then how does that fit into right and left? And then why is left and not right? And then back to what we were saying about optimal path and journeys and things like that. Well, choose the right path, the correct path. It's kind of such an interesting, fascinating connection with how that word and its origins and the etymology of it, perhaps, right? And you know, maybe left is just it's just one of these. Well, maybe right, correct, and right shouldn't be associated with the same as right and left, right? The right
Yes.
path could be any direction, basically, right? The correct path or decision could be any direction, right? As long as it's not backwards, I guess. Moving forwards, maybe, right? But yeah, and certainly left may not be the incorrect path, right? But yeah, it's fascinating to get into words and how they originated and even how they trans
Yeah.
go across different languages, right?
And I think it's fascinating as well because I often have these conversations with people, again, just this idea of creating awareness. So when you're young and we're learning and we're just watching and we're observing, we're focusing on emotions, we're
Mhm.
focusing on body language, reactions, how we do things, all this type of things. And basically what we're doing is obviously we're experiencing those emotions, those feelings,
Mhm.
and then we learn a word for it.
Right. Yeah, yeah, no. And
Yes, but
words
then
are
you're
actually restrictive, right?
I was just going to say, but now you're labeling that emotion or that feeling to that word. So later on in life, anytime you tend to use that word in a sentence or you're listening to somebody, what are you naturally going to do is you're going to go back to that feeling or that emotion.
Mhm. Yeah. And there are far more feelings and emotions than words to describe them, right? And you can even like in some languages, there are even 50 words for one emotion in another language, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's more important emotion that they have more words to describe the different levels of it, right? And yeah, this is where facial expressions and not only being conscious of what someone is telling you, but looking at what their body is telling you, right? Or
Yeah.
or how they're telling it to you. Again, frequency, sound, vibration, right? And trying to be more conscious of what someone is actually saying, not just through their words, but or what what they're really saying, right? And obviously we all know, you know, things are hidden in truth and stuff, right? But yeah, there's more emotions than words, and being conscious of that and aware of that helps you to choose the right words, because then you want to try and express the correct emotion or feeling, right?
Of course. And this is why I think it's fascinating because obviously language sometimes, like you said, and words can be limiting. And
Hmm.
especially when you start to, we've got the wonderful ability now to speak to so many different cultures and, people with different language, different
Sure.
understanding. And it's just how do you sometimes, I've been there where somebody's tried to translate something and they just give up because they're like, no, there just isn't a word for it in English.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you're
No.
just like, oh, and you feel like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it's funny, right? But look, I think we've been going for a
Oh,
while, so
yeah.
I suggest we could go on for a lot longer, and I suggest we do it again, right? And like you said,
Yeah, no, I
we
could
can
talk
try
for
and
hours.
make it more regular. But I
Mm.
think let's leave it here. So if you
Yes.
managed to watch all of this, we thank you for your patience. We hope you learned something. Please leave a comment or give us any feedback in the replies and like and subscribe. Check out Seb and his links. I'll put in the comments as well,
Appreciate it. Yeah,
and
thanks.
check out our content and
Mm.
subscribe for some more great conversations, basically, right?
Definitely. And yeah, thanks so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. Really enjoyable.
Absolutely.
And it's always nice also, I think, as well to know the person behind the business and the brand and the values. And I think you give a really true reflection on what you stand for as a person, and that comes through in your brand and your products. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I appreciate that, right? I try to make it embody me, right? It's almost a bit like a personal brand that I've done the other way around. I'm trying to build the community now after it, but
nice.
yeah, hopefully we get there. All right,
Yeah.
thanks a lot. Then
Bye.
I really appreciate it and see you next time.